Hi guys, where to go in the world? That's a tough question, and many of you guys are asking you this question in a context where basically we've got global tyranny on steroid. Global is trying to deploy their plan to control the population, basically. And in that context, many of you are wondering where to go in the world. Um, I asked myself this question twice over the past 5 years. In 2020, I was living in Hong Kong. I said, okay, enough of what's going on here in Hong Kong. With a change, political change, economic, social change, uh, and we move to EU because I'm an EU citizen. And then in 2024, I asked myself this question again, and we move to another country in South America. And I want to help you to think globally about your options of where to go. Uh, so it would be a high level video, high level view, stepping back versus basically the world and finding a place on where to go. Because many times you guys fall into paralysis by analysis. You basically overthink your move so much, you go into so much detail that you lost. You can't take any decision, and what happens is that you stay at the same place. Or you make bad decision actually. Alright, so let's go to Google Earth. This is Google Earth, okay. Main options, right? Depending on where you live. So, first things first, those who live in Asia tend to stay in Asia right now. There was number of Hong Kongese and Chinese who move to Canada, to diverse place, to UK as well, a country where English is spoken. People in Southeast Asia tend to stay there basically. Um, there was mandates during COVID. I'm not sure if it's too much due to the globalist plan or the incompetence of local governments, but people tend to stay here. If you go down, people in Thailand tend to stay in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Singapore. People stay there. Then you've got this block here where I was basically a lab. Australia was a lab for totalitarianism, right? Um, there was coercion. When I say Australia, it goes with New Zealand as well, because basically they were, and they are still run by globalists. And so those people who stay there experience mandates, uh, being ridiculed by the system if they were not vaccinated, losing their job. And so you saw people from these areas moving into other place in the world. Really different place, okay? And some people are still moving because the trend here in Australia and New Zealand, it's not finished so far. Um, if we take India, people tend to stay in India. Um, Africa, um, low vaccination rate, low mandates, low regulation, because they don't have the means to implement control there, basically. People are so busy finding ways to get food, get a few dollars per day, uh, taking care of their family, that if this bullshit of lockdowns and mandate was applied here, you would paralyze the system, and that would basically go into chaos very quickly. And so that's the reason why the vaccination rate is still low. It wasn't also the priority of globalists. The priority of globalists was um, the Commonwealth first. So those places are definitely options, but it goes with the specific of Africa, uh, the language, the culture, the access to basic things that you need on a daily basis. So foreigners would tend to usually stay into capitals. If you take, for instance, Tanzania, they would tend to stay in Dar es Salaam, which is the economic hub. So it's an option. If you feel comfortable in Africa, it's definitely an option. I don't think you'll be bothered soon. The Middle East, uh, not really stable areas. I'm not an expert in Middle East. EU, there's different level of coercion according to countries. Remember, the highest coercion was Australia, Germany, France, Italy to some extent. Um, and then you've got this block in East Europe where people experienced totalitarianism before, and the people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s know exactly what's going on because they already saw it coming before. Unfortunately, the younger people here have difficulty to understand what's happening, and some tend to stay, although we see more and more of them leaving. There's definitely people here, France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, literally running away from those countries. Spain as well, it has started. I was one of those who exit Spain in 2024 because of the growing uh, EU tyranny, basically. So I don't think you want to stay in EU. EU is definitely not the place. So there's some people who think about certain location inside the geographical EU, but like Serbia, like Montenegro, this little country here, Albania, um, but these are not long-term option. It might be short-term option for the next 2 years, but not long-term options. Turkey is in stable inflation as well. There's cultural aspect to Turkey. Some people don't feel at ease there. These are nice places, right? Basically, Mediterranean climate here, right? Good weather. I know people who live on island, for instance, be it Malta, Crete, Cyprus, but you too much in the mouth of in the epicenter of a potential war, right? The problem is that now, so there's also a stage war in Ukraine, made up war, of course, because the globalists control the narrative. But you are very likely to see war opening here on this front as well, maybe as Romania, but very likely here, right? Like previous war. So Africa has an option. Uh, what happened here? Canada was basically also a lab for Fiani. It's a Fiani. It's a model directly exported from China. Trudeau doesn't hide it. That he is happy with the Chinese model, basically. And so people from Canada getting out. There's still people going to Canada. It's like I don't think they understand what's going on. And usually it's Asian people. Or you will see sometimes, for instance, French people or EU people going to Australia thinking that it was fine in Australia. I think they don't have access to the right information, those people. Big mistake. US People tend to stay here, but they will relocate inside the US to different states. I remember people moving out of California to go toward Florida, to go toward Texas, states with policies which are different and not uh, following closely the globalist uh, mandate narrative. A lot of people went to Mexico. It's not surprising. The influx of foreigners to Mexico was pretty dramatic over the past 4 years. Mexico has changed. I think it's really important to study the latest aspect. I wouldn't go toward um, where the foreigners go the most, like Quintana Roo, Cancun, the Yucatan Peninsula. I would go more toward mountainous area if you want to be in Guerrero, for instance. Um, that's more advantageous. Then we've got the bunch of Latin American country here. Costa Rica is an option for many of the people, but the cost, you need to have a significant budget. Panama is not really great place to stay. For those who know, Guatemala I have not much experience. Belize, not great to stay. Nicaragua could be an option, although you need to basically pay for your residence every 6 months. It's a bit the same case as those Southeast Asian countries where you need to pay, bring money, and that's not really a great system. You're not really welcome there. Welcome as long as you pay money or you be used, but if you are useless, then get out. And then in South America, so we opted as a family for Paraguay because of the ease of the visa to enter Paraguay. Brazil has some constraints. There's also an Americanization basically of Brazil, which is not that great. Politically run by Lula, so as a liberal, so you're likely to see vaccination being asked. Although when I talk to people on the ground, they say that rules are basically ignored. I do think that if you think globally, then based on historic events, you don't want to be here. You don't want to live in EU unless you are really in a place where you can be left alone. You can opt for this, which is Africa, a massive landmass, a lot of resources, but you need to know how to operate within this area definitely. And I suspect it's mostly being able to interact with the people, most important. I don't think you want to opt for the Middle East. Russia has a massive landmass as well, so if you're comfortable with the weather, with the language, and the culture, then I suspect it's a fantastic option. It's not for everyone. There's the option of country like Kazakhstan. They did experience the mandate as well. Don't be fooled as well to some extent. And then I would not advise to go to China because it's a lot about control, surveillance, and you don't really know. I think the mindset in China is that the people are disposable, so you can get rid of the people at any point in time if it's really convenient and if it has to be done. It's the interest of a few versus the rest of the population. And usually the interest of the few is being prioritized, whether it's simply Xi Jinping or the globalists behind. I wouldn't operate there, basically. South Korea is too small. Japan, Japan is an exception on earth, I would say. It's pretty small piece of land, high density. Again, unless you find an area where you can be left alone, I wouldn't stay there on an island like that, especially in a context of potential conflict between the US and China at some point in time. Even if it's a theater play, people are being impacted. I suspect that South America is a good option because of the geographical distance to some strategic centers, basically. So, US, China, and the place where most the largest war were being staged, EU. Um, so it's about here finding a place where you can arrive and settle. You've got the Mercosur group with a number of countries. Chile was pretty pro mandates during COVID, to my understanding. So you do not want to opt for capitals. Don't forget that there's the movement of the C40 cities, which uh, contain more than 40 cities now. But the goal is really to push people toward large cities so that they can be controlled, right? And in that context, you don't want to go into large cities. Okay, they are convenient, but it's a massive risk, right? For us, we opted for Paraguay as a landing place, and then based on what's happening, we have an ability to move around. Which, I mean, if South America is not safe anymore, then you can expect that most of the place on Earth wouldn't be safe anymore. Now, a bunch of you think of islands, right? So, island like, for instance, Dominican Republic. There is Mauritius here. The problem of islands in that, as the example of Guadeloupe show during COVID, if the states decide to lock down your island, Guadeloupe here, for instance, the French island belong to France, mandates, you couldn't get out, couldn't get in, you are fucked. That's the truth. Unless you have a boat and you can really move, right? You have the capability to move. If you have a boat, it means you have a lot of resources, right? Because a boat is not cheap at all usually. Or you have a really good skill in navigation. Then you'll be blocked on the island. So basically, they are potential jail. Never forget that. And one good example was this massive island that ended up being a jail because most of the population is living into very defined area. There's not much people inland actually, and so that's the reason why it was turned into a lab, because it's pretty easy to conquer. Factor something in when you're gonna opt for a place. It's the climate, right? How easy it is to grow food, how easy it is to develop your autonomy. If you want to grow food here, you can, right? The weather is friendly for the food. Although you will have insect and a strong sun, you can grow food pretty easily. If you take, for instance, Costa Rica, there's a lot of food growing, right? So you have access to food. Try to go to the north of Canada and grow food. You will understand, right? Even actually, if you go to Uh, North, even if you go to Michigan, you realize that the growing season is very short, right? So weather is important. Um, a good strategy could be to be in an area where you've got flat land and mountain, so that you can go in altitude, so that even if the country is in an area where it's hot, then due to the fact that you can go up, you can reduce the amount of heat, the temperature basically that you get. Very convenient. So, and that's the reason why I like to look at Google Earth, because you can easily spot things. So Paraguay is pretty much a flat land, but even inside Paraguay, you've got areas, for instance here, that are higher than other areas, right? So here you can go up to 5, 600, 700 meters. Um, Same thing when you live in Mexico, which is 80% mountainous land. Basically, you have the option. See, this is all relief. So mountain and valleys, and you can see it very clearly. So this gives you a lot of option. It's also land that is difficult to control, even through uh, drones or infrastructure. It's not easy to control. The more flat is your land, the more easy it is to control. Not a surprise that globalists target things like Netherlands, like some area of France. It's flat, it's easy to control. Option of some people opt for Iceland also. Um, those are specific, basically, decision, I would say. A lot of people are coming to South America right now. There's a good reason for that. All right. Feel free to let me know what you think. The key point here is just to help you to step back and make a decision for yourself. So what I did for my move is that every time I identified the variables that are important that will define my choice. So variable that I look for instance, the level of the mandates, how obedient is the population, the weather, ability to grow food, quantity of regulation, um, the cost of life, things like that. And then I look at select a bunch of places based on my research, a bunch of countries, and then I rate them basically, maybe from 1 to 5 or just low, medium, high. And then I narrow down to the top 3 of them. And based on that, what you need to do is to do more in-depth research for those 3 options that you have. You will have a trip there if possible. Go check the place by yourself, and then make your moving decision. Either you move or you don't move, right? Um, don't really play this game of like saying, if I see this, I will move, because you're gonna burn yourself at this game. Basically, it's just most people don't see it coming. Like, it's coming too fast, and and it's a nightmare to have to follow up. Like, if I see this, because how do you measure that? Most of the time you can't, right? And we saw so many things already in the West that if it's still okay for you to stay there in a country where you were treated like basically worse than an animal, then maybe stay in the West in that case, because like you have accepted that and you stayed there, right? If you need help for your move, feel free to reach out. Again, the key point here was to step back. get you out of paralysis by analysis for those who are in this situation where you're constantly looping and you don't know what to do and stuff like that. You've got to make a decision. And in the current context, I don't think it would be a bad decision to leave the country where the level of coercion is pretty high. Cheers.